I'm here today in a very interesting situation because a few months ago I stumbled upon a piece by an artist in the UK called Dylan Gill. And intriguingly, the painting was called Metaruptions, which for those who follow my work will know that it's a term I have coined and played with since 2019 and is a core theme which we're going to talk about around the Disruptive Futures Institute and how we think about systemic change. And we're here with the painting today, and more importantly than the painting, the painter,
Yep.
Dylan. And so we're going to exchange just on how we think about change and art and the intersection between many things.
Brilliant.
I think the first aspect which is always interesting is to think about how you actually decided, before we talk about this particular piece, there's a direction and a choice of creativity around art and painting, which would be very interesting to get a better sense of.
Yeah.
How did Dylan end up sitting here today and producing such amazing...
Well, I was born in Southeast London, and as a child, in London, it's a very energized place, very noisy. I think I was about age 6. I started to paint. My mum, she introduced me to painting, and then at school we would paint, and that was the only time I was able to escape the noise, so to speak. I was able to take that energy and focus it onto paper, And ever since my childhood, like most artists, I've always been in love with art and painting, creating, escaping, so to speak.
It's interesting, the juxtaposition of the two words, escaping and creating.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you want to expand on that.
To create is to escape. I've always been one for peace and quiet. I like to go to Cornwall. Me and my wife go down to Cornwall a lot to escape, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been like that my whole life. So art just took me out of that and it's put me into a zone, basically, where sound would disappear, and all I could see was the image that I was drawing or painting. So that was my escapism from not so much life, but just the energy of life, around, big city and that sort of thing. When you look at my painting, what to you does it say about Metaruptions? What do you see in that painting that points towards that word?
I saw this element of contrast.
Yeah.
Some which felt either both positive and negative at the same time, or more inherently negative or more inherently positive, whether it's the contrast in the colors. I'm slightly colorblind, but I can see that a light blue is probably more meant to be positive, or the sun or something than the other side. So I saw, in a sense, this idea of duality can be two things at once. There are many different elements, so your choice of putting them together on the same painting meant that they interact somehow and cohabitate.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting to the meta idea that we are not dealing with isolated, specific, distinct artifacts or features or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that can interact.
Right, okay, yeah.
And then there's also things that are more objects, there are things that are more human, there are things that are more animal kingdom, and there are things that are more, whether it's nature or, the sun, etc. So I thought, again, it's representative, it's not just a feature, and I think it comes across in your language of emotions, but I didn't know that at the time, of how important emotions are.
Yeah.
But it's not just a statement on technology or statement on humanity or statement on the climate or the sun or the sea. And so it resonates with the features of Metaruptions, being two things at once, being inherently neutral, interacting and cascading and possibly in surprising, unexpected way, some idea of adaptation, or I use the term agency. So those are kind of the contrast, paradoxes and tensions within the different elements and how they might interact.
Brilliant. So Roger, what do you actually mean by the word Metaruptions and what it means to you?
It's really this idea of change is a constant. It's systemic change. And it's self-reinforcing. It cascades into second or third order implications, which themselves will bring in other changes. I mean, coining a word can be gimmicky, unnecessary, can be many things, and maybe it's still all of the above. But to my mind, when I was thinking of equivalent terms for change, I thought, in a sense, one of the best ones is from Zen Buddhism or Eastern philosophy, which is, transience, mujo, Heraclitus, you never put your foot in the same water twice because the water has moved on,
right? Yeah.
And you're no longer the same. But I felt that in the world today, the words which we came up with most as society and media and attention are either words which are disruption, which I think, number one, it's very Silicon Valley, technology, innovation, business trope, right? It's an important word, it's relevant, but it also feels slightly isolated and specific.
Yeah, all right.
It's usually around a particular field or technology or company that's being disruptive. And there's rules to engagement. This is defined as disruptive innovation, like to take the language of Clayton Christensen, or this isn't. Once you can isolate them, describe them, replicate them, I think loses this idea that things are self-reinforcing, interconnected, cascading, etc. So I didn't feel that word disruption was still as relevant for the broader systemic changes of the world, which are not emanating or staying in one particular field. And you can see it with interest rates and the central banks, when they would project and say, this is the outcome, and we're expecting this interest rate. And then all the policy and initiatives are based on what comes out of the computer. And then suddenly you have the highest inflation in 50 years, and they sort of like shrug and say, well, we thought we could control it, had no idea. And it's because of this idea where you predict and act on the basis of one specific thing or change, and not appreciating how systemic different things are. So Metaruptions, in a sense, was trying to take this idea. I mean, it's a portmanteau of meta, nothing to do with the ex-Facebook name, but the meta in the broader sense, overriding, and ruption, which is rupture, which is, and it's interesting because it's like your eruption. With the volcano. And it's not inherently positive or negative. Part of what will determine whether it's a breakthrough as a positive or breakdown as a collapse is the agency you exercise, the filter you have on the world, how you see the world, which will inform how you prepare and how you might respond. You've titled this Metaruptions, and it has a lot of very specific things, but there's also an overriding theme, and it's very fluid, and I can see what you're saying about emotions. And if we take a step back now, specifically with this painting, the title, I'd be very interested in how that came about, and also why you felt it was important to dedicate a painting to that in this way.
A lot of people know that the UK is very... we've got a lot of CCTV cameras. We've got too many, to be fair. We need them in areas and we don't, but technology in a way has taken over. If you go back 40 years, it was a different world, but now technology has taken over with this painting, because normally with my art I focus very deep on one point. It would be more of a single purpose, whereas with this art and a few of my other paintings now, there's a lot more going on. And I'm trying to bring the digital age in and focus on that, because I think the only way to be contemporary now is to bring in the digital age, computer, AI, technology. And this is what I've tried to do with this painting. And that's why your word fitted it perfectly, because I wanted to paint something contemporary, something modern, something that represented what's going on in the world, and your word just worked perfectly for this painting. And so I'm trying to expand now on the canvases rather than stick to one subject. I've been doing that for quite a few years now, and now I'm trying to make it a lot broader so it can connect with more people and relate to people more. So,
and if you think about now the moving from the origin story to how would you describe or interpret Metaruptions in its own right from the title you gave to your painting, and then maybe then how that manifests in the painting, because some will be more evident to me and probably others, and I think the CCTV is a good example, without wanting to put words in your mouth, I'm sensing that there's a kind of negative, also possibly positive, but certainly change or difference. Can you walk us through how Metaruptions is manifesting in the painting? Give us examples with some details, but also more broadly.
Like I was saying earlier, with the colours, like red, obviously, it can stand for passion. It can also stand for shock. While you look at Screen by Bob Monk, he used a lot of reds and oranges. And as you work through, you've got the blue tones. That's more of a calmer, relaxed. CCTV is there to protect us, as well as some people see it as an invasion of privacy. With the faces, etc., the hand around the wrist, but holding the sun. Faces represent like the change in shape of what's going on in the world today. The way the landscape we're used to is constantly changing, and like I said to you earlier, Roger, Metaruptions to me is like a volcano erupting. It's shocking, disruptive, but it just changes the landscape. You got the red, you got the blue, and they're clashing, and that's the big bang, the big shock that comes out of it. But the painting itself is like a map for chaos. But it tells a story, and it is basically about a changing landscape.
If I take maybe elements, not sure that's the word. So I think we have human representation. Animal representation, like sun, different things. Can you walk us through those elements and maybe between, that particular fish, what's above the fish, and then the sort of idea of the animals, if that's what they are, and their purpose, and other elements that you wish to comment on.
Well, with the fish, that was my input on the ocean and the way the coral reef has been affected by climate change or by fossil fuels. The animals aren't so much animals. The one with the ears, you see, it's more of a UFO. That's another.
I thought it might be.
Yeah. That's
fantastic.
Like they're doing the disclosure at the moment.
And
I thought, well, why have they waited this long? But I'll add that because that's representing that with the CCTV as well. And then you've got the figures. These figures here, and you got one on the far side over there. They represent the changing of the landscape, changing of people's consciousness, the way we think, because people they experience emotions more so now through screens rather than in life. Well, that is life, but it's a digital form of life rather than the way we used to when we used to get up and go out and experience it. The sun, the weather. But the sun is like a beginning point. It's a beginning point where you focus on the sun, and everything that comes next is the uncertainty of what the day will bring or what the week or month will bring. It's it's very difficult to explain, but as a viewer, when you look at it, hopefully you will you'll be able to experience it. I have had people contact me through social media asking me about the title, and I've explained to them what it's all about, what it means, and then hopefully I've gone back to the painting and they can look at it perhaps slightly differently and a different way and understand it more. But I think as time goes on, especially after this chat, people will want to understand even more. They'll want to understand the word even more, which I did, to be fair. I discovered the word when I was looking for a one-worded title for that painting, and it worked. It fitted perfectly. It was contemporary. It was technology rolled in with good old-fashioned disruption, brought together, and it worked perfectly for that painting. And everything I said in that painting, the one word said for me as well. I've discovered you. I looked into other things that are connected to Metaruptions, and other people will too. It's the curiosity that leads people, which is brilliant. And that's a Metaruption on its own.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. I think the whole point of Metaruptions is that I was short in terms of the current usage of language. Polycrisis or permacrisis. I think these are words which have captured the past few years. I understand why. I think these are words, polycrisis and permacrisis, which are hyper relevant to today. But they do have something inherently negative about them, which takes away agency. It's slightly deterministic. For me, it was, well, how do you reflect this dynamic, systemic, constant change without it being inherently positive or negative at the onset, which allows you to have some agency as to how you might react, respond, prepare to things. And so finding a word which I don't think exists in disruption, in polycrisis, in permacrisis. And the final theme around Metaruptions, it's a contrast to certain words which were very relevant around understanding trends, like Megatrends or Metatrends.
Yeah.
These are books and terminology that have existed for some time that are very good at taking a broader family of trends that we understand and thinking about the future on the basis of extrapolating that. The problem with constant change that's nonlinear and exponential is, first of all, trends, in a sense, you're looking at a rearview mirror. Second of all, you're not necessarily taking the second or third order implications of them, how they might cascade. Thirdly, even a mega trend, you're kind of thinking about something that develops slowly and that you can identify. Whereas with nonlinear and asymmetric exponential eras, technology or the interaction of these things, change can be slow until it isn't. And so it becomes very fast. Things don't necessarily always seem inherently negative. The colors, some are slightly more lighter blues to contrast with some maybe darker colors. CCTV, you're mentioning an aspect of possible protection, and then untoward impacts. The ocean, you mentioned the impact on climate, which is inherently very destructive and negative. And the UFO, I had suspected it could be a UFO, but I had not thought...
it's a living UFO.
It's a living UFO, yes, which is kind of half between human, animal, and UFO. And indeed, you painted this, or at least it's officially dated, I think, January 2026 or December. So it's very recent. We're having this podcast in 2026. And you're right, it's in the midst of a new resurgence of interest with the disclosure.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Can you maybe zoom in on that aspect of how you perceive or not the neutrality of it, and which aspects you feel in the painting are either neutral or inherently positive or negative? And obviously you put them all together, so it's the combination and how they interact that presumably is the interesting takeaway.
Well, for me it is neutral. When you think about all the things in life, the things that happen, we always adjust. Definitely in my lifetime, there's always been a crisis, always. So we have to adjust, we have to change the way we live at times, we have to change the way we think. And that's the neutral aspect of it. That's the neutral pathway, so to speak. We stand on a neutral pathway. So whatever comes next, we adjust and we move on. We move forward, hopefully move forward. Or we might move backwards until we can move forward again, but we adjust. And so it's always a neutral thing. We always sit in a neutral space, no matter what happens. And we learn, we adjust, perhaps evolve a bit, and when we move on.
That ties in very well with the way we think about change. It's systemic. Some are categorically bad. Some are, by all means, much more positive. They interact, but at any point in time, there's probably a combination, and some of the positive or negative are not inherently positive or negative. I think a lot of the world, we like to put things in a box and say it's categorically this or that, or good or bad, but many things are inherently a combination. So I'm going to ask you a question around the future.
Yep.
There's no data on the future, we don't know the future, but if you were to imagine, because this is opening the door to something constant, which is always different, but always changes a constant kind of thing. Do you feel that there might be a form of acceleration which may lead to things that are irreversible or thresholds that might mean that while today it might be open and enabling adjustment, and that window might orient differently in the future because some of these changes could be irreversible or could reach thresholds? Is that something that crosses your mind, or that painting evokes, or not necessarily?
We've already crossed that line, to be fair. Everything changes. It's definitely changed in the last 20 years. And with technology, I couldn't live without technology now, and most people couldn't. So that's changed, the world as we know it. We're not going to go back to the 1990s and go back to that way of living. It's never going to come back. So especially technology, that's the one thing. You go back 300 years, you look at up to say 1970s, but you go back to the 1670s, the only thing that really changed was we had cars and we had trains and things like that, and dress wear was different, but the way of thinking didn't really change a lot.
No, that's a good way of framing it. I guess I may be being a little bit provocative, but everything you're describing ties in quite well with our own thinking. So I guess there's a difference between irreversibility, reaching a threshold which has a significant impact, which could even be existential, versus irreversibility, to your point, and the wording you used was very evocative, which is effectively you will never get back.
Yeah.
And you're right, both are irreversible because you can never get back. So there's a new state and that will evolve and you'll never get back to prior states. That's just a feature of change, and that makes a lot of sense. And I guess the one thing I would think now is around whether there's certain inflection points. Some might be climate or nuclear or biotech, some might be technology or AI, where that particular inflection point is so significant that not only can we never go back to prior states, which may be good or bad, or it's just different, but which are more existential. So let's say, we got into artificial superintelligence or artificial general intelligence. Even without the dystopian rogue science fiction, evil bots, etc., there's a gradual risk on humans, how they think, on their relevance, and many other things. What's real, what's not real. And so some of this is changing gradually in its own right, today, yesterday, tomorrow. But they're not necessarily visible thresholds. But then there might be some that are visible, irreversible thresholds that are more existential. Judging from what you've said, that's not something you necessarily bring into the fray of this particular painting or around how you see Metaruptions. You see it just as impermanence, transience, constant change.
Yeah.
Do you have a view on whether some of those thresholds on the existential side fits into any of your thinking or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily. But with painting, with art, with creativity, you can do that, but in a subtle way.
Yeah.
If someone comes away from a gallery and they look at a work of art and it's stuck with them, then they've changed that artist changed that person's day. But the artist painted it not to do that, but to get something off of their own mind, to place on canvas.
Can you maybe share why Neo-Cubism, how distinct it is in terms of for translating how you see art?
Well, Neo-Cubism for me is more contemporary Cubism than the traditional Cubism. You look at Picasso, for example. They would work with subjects it could be figurative, it could be It could be a violin. It could be anything, still life. But they'd work and they'd fragmentate it so they could see every single angle to produce a movement. With Neo-Cubism, it's more street art. It's more you got more emotion in it. I bring different colours in. Picasso, for instance, he would work with, say, for example, blue, and he'd bring different tones of blue throughout the painting. Or he'd use a rustic colour and bring different browns, creams, etc. I just bring in different colours to work with the emotion of the work. So you could have, like, in this painting, Metaruptions, you got the blue side, which is more of a calmer, relaxed. Even though there's a lot going on, it's more of a calmer, relaxed, but then it meets with the red side, it clashes. So that's the disruption. And, that's what I like to bring into my art. Whereas traditional Cubism, it was more of a study rather than, an emotional piece. So that's the difference for me between Neo-Cubism and, traditional Cubism.
Well, maybe one final question, actually, because you just mentioned the dynamic aspects, the broadening. You're actually very global as well. You get a lot of interest. You're exhibited in galleries in Asia, which is obviously a very different culture. Do you think that either from the demand side, so people who are interested in your art or who purchase it perceive things differently in Asia? And also, when you think about something like this, do you think it's equally translatable as something universal? Do you have any thoughts on that aspect?
No, when I paint, I just paint what's in my head, and I bring colour into that, and hopefully people can connect to it and, in certain ways relate to it. And I think in Asia, I think they connect to the colours and, the brightness, the sharp lines and that, and it sort of works with their way of life. They sort of relate to it. I don't go out of my way to connect with certain cultures.
Sure.
I just hope they look at my art and they'll just see how it resonates with them.
The thing about data, as an example, is that it's inherently looking at the past, right? There's no data on the future. And if you're thinking that maybe what the features we're describing of Metaruptions and change, effectively, it can be a proxy for saying that it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
And if it's non-linear or asymmetric or exponential, the profile, not only is it unpredictable, but it can change suddenly.
Right.
So if you think of how you would use data, it's often used to inform a decision around a future you don't know, which is maybe okay as a proxy or device to inform decision making in an environment which is relatively stable, predictable, controllable, and linear. But if you take away those features and you're in an environment which is metaruptive or metaruptions, which we've been talking about, then the value of the data is limited, if not dangerous, because it's like trends.
Yeah.
What you want to do is imagining what possibilities might arise. Not to prepare for each and individual one, but to think about what does it mean that you might imagine different things. You're seeing the world which is more broad in terms of possibilities. So therefore, instead of focusing on the predictiveness of it, you're focusing on possible outcomes, which means that you want to focus on the resiliency and how you prepare for those outcomes you might not know.
Yeah.
That is going to come from imagination, because it's not something that is deterministic. It's not something that is extrapolated. It's not something that is, going to come from any playbook or from experience and that. And so when I extrapolate it with art, and that's why I'm so glad we were able to connect here in London and have these exchanges, is that ultimately, and you said it many times, maybe it wasn't the exact same words, but ultimately it's for the viewer to interpret this as they wish, as they see. Yeah. You're just giving pathways, you're manifesting with an artifact, things which are evocative, but ultimately they might then imagine things, connect the dots in ways that aren't intuitive, see things differently, which might inform future decision making. And all that, to me, is moving away from the expected, the predictive, or what you might do with the data. Because assumptions, the wrong assumptions, basically, with time and in unexpected, unpredictable, nonlinear environments, over time, assumptions, they no longer lose relevancy, but they explode, if you're relying on assumption to everything else. And so the beauty with imagination is that you're hopefully exercising this, Zen Buddhism, Eastern philosophy idea of Shoshin, beginner's mind, and you might be connecting things that are maybe not intuitive or relying less on habit, prediction, etc. So that for me is a very significant purpose of art, of imagination, which does not come from trend reports or data analysis or what have you.
It's more of a human approach, rather than a computer.
Exactly.
It's bringing out more of the human in us. So
in Metaruptions or Metaruptive environments, a computer shouldn't be doing a better job than humans. The future is unpredictable, whether you're human or a machine or you're fish.
So,
well, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you, Roger. Yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you.